I know what you're thinking. How arrogant and brazen of me to dictate to Neil effin' deGrasse Tyson what he believes or doesn't. How inelegantly transparent is my attempt to grab attention and stir up some controversy just to garner more views and subscribers. No, that's really not the case here. While I can't deny that focusing on a famous, well-liked public figure will invariably bring attention to my channel, the motivation to critique Mr. Tyson is to show that even the brightest among us can make stupid comments born of misunderstanding. I am in no way minimizing this great man's intelligence or his stellar work as a science educator. However, on the topic of a God's existence and the terms he uses to describe himself, he is just patently false. I have immense respect for the man and the work he does, but like I've said before, no one ought to be free from criticism. A sign of irrationality is the refusal to critique falsities when presented, no matter who makes them. The purpose of this video is not to change Mr. Tyson's mind, as it's highly unlikely he will ever watch it, but instead it's to encourage people who don't believe in a God to come out and identify as atheist. Let's put the baggage aside and own the term. Now, let's get started.
I'm often asked, and occasionally in an accusatory way, are you atheist? You know, the only ist I am is a scientist.
All right, from the onset, this remark is a bit ambiguous. Has Mr. Tyson been asked accusatorily if he is an atheist from theists or other atheists? A theist who dislikes God deniers might be upset if Neil ended up being one of them atheists. In an uncomfortably number of churches, mosques, and other places of worship, atheists are linked with Satan and all manners of bad things. For a theist who has been taught from birth that atheists are devil spawn, it would not be surprising to find an accusatory question directed at Mr. Tyson. If, on the other hand, Neil is referring to atheists who question him in an accusatory manner, we see here the beginnings of how Mr. Tyson perceives atheists, angry and militant. But it may be a bit too early to make such a proclamation, so let's keep going and see how this pans out.
I don't associate with movements. I'm not an ism. I think for myself.
After watching this clip, it seems to me that Neil here takes pride in the fact that he does not associate with movements, as if doing so is a bad thing. I just can't imagine that he's not for the child rights movement or Black Lives Matter. Civil rights, disability rights, fair trade, freedom of speech, human rights, or the LGBT social movements, just to name a few. Perhaps he doesn't frequently or directly participate in these movements, but I highly doubt he would be unsupportive of the goals that they strive to achieve. Of course, there are movements that are silly or harmful, but it's wrong to insinuate that being a part of a movement of any sort is automatically a negative or undesirable thing. Additionally, I too am not an ism. I am not an atheism or a veganism. An ism is the totality of a movement or philosophy, and unless you're a one-man show, you will not encompass the entirety of it. I'm just not quite sure what point Neil was trying to make here. Now, his last remark was the catalyst for the creation of this video. You know what, Mr. Tyson? I too think for myself, and to suggest that belonging to a community of like-minded individuals requires the relinquishing of freedom and self-thought is insulting. Atheists do not all believe all the same things, confined to a set of approved beliefs. All it takes to be an atheist is the lack of a belief in a God. Whatever you believe after that is separate and has nothing to do with your stance on the existence of a God.
Once someone attaches you to a philosophy or a movement, then they assign all the baggage and all the rest of the philosophy that goes with it to you. And when you want to have a conversation, they will assert that they already know everything important there is to know about you because of that association.
We cannot control what baggage others bring to a conversation, nor should we be at fault for it. The human population is chock full of misunderstanding and confusion of even simple terms and words, and there is little we can do except to start by using terms like theist or atheist to identify one's general position on the God claim, and then proceed to explain in more detail the nuances of your position and beliefs. An individual's worldview cannot be simply defined by a couple of terms. However, using terms with meanings that are widely accepted help direct conversation to a point at which both parties can better understand the other's perspective. If someone misunderstands what an atheist is, it is better to start with the label and flesh out in which way it has been misunderstood. To avoid or dodge the labels to cause further confusion. For the sake of further clarification, imagine this scenario. A Christian approaches me and asks if I believe in a God. I answer with no, I don't. In response, the Christian then asks if I am an atheist, and if I respond with, no, I'm not, what is the Christian to think? The Christian would be rightly confused. If I add that I don't like to be constrained within labels and that I think for myself, how does this further the conversation and provide clarification? It doesn't. All you've done is distance yourself from the very term that best describes your position on the claim of a God's existence. This helps no one.
So what people are really after is, what is my stance on religion or spirituality or God? And I would say if I had to find a word that came closest, it would be agnostic.
Oh no, Neil, you are much too intelligent to self-identify solely as an agnostic. I'm not about to rehash the problem of agnosticism all over again, as I've done a whole video on it recently, but I will discuss a few major points. 1. Agnosticism isn't a middle ground between theism on one side and atheism on the other. 2. Agnosticism and Gnosticism is a claim of knowledge in regards to the existence or non-existence of a God. 3. Atheism and theism is a claim of belief in regards to the existence or non-existence of a God. I am an agnostic atheist because while I don't know if a God exists, agnosticism, due to the lack of positive evidence for the existence of a God, I live my life without a belief in a God, atheism. There are only two sides to this particular coin. Either you believe in a God or you lack a belief in a God. There is no middle ground with belief.
To refer to someone who doesn't know but hasn't yet really seen evidence for it, but is prepared to embrace the evidence if it's there, but if it's not, it won't be forced to have to think something that is not otherwise supported.
In this clip, Neil is relaying his understanding of what it means to be an agnostic, and while he starts off on the right path, he wanders off and insinuates that atheists are incapable of accepting evidence of a God should some come to light. Atheism isn't some dogmatic commitment to the rejection of a God, but instead is the most rational position to hold when claims of a God's existence are not accompanied by sufficient evidence. I'm not an atheist because I don't want there to be a God, or that I'm searching out reasons not to believe. I'm an atheist because theists haven't provided me evidence to believe. Exceptional claims require exceptionally good evidence. If such evidence could be discovered, verified, and presented to me, I would have no choice but to accept it. Failing to do so would result in my beliefs being contrary to reality, which is not something I strive for.
There are many atheists who say, well, all agnostics are atheists. Like, okay. I'm constantly claimed by atheists. I find this intriguing.
I'm not quite sure who Mr. Tyson has been speaking to, but no intelligent and informed atheist I've ever interacted with would assert that all agnostics are atheists. Being an agnostic simply means you do not know if a God exists. I am an agnostic atheist because I don't know if a God exists, and I have not been convinced to believe in such a thing. Alternately, one can be an agnostic theist, which simply defines a person who doesn't know if a God exists, but nonetheless believes in one for whatever reason. I also am an agnostic aleprechaunist because I don't know for certain if leprechauns exist, but since I've never been presented with sufficient evidence to warrant belief, I lack a belief in their existence. Not knowing if a God exists and not believing the claim that a God exists is not the same thing. On to Neil's second comment in this clip, in which he asserts that atheists claim him as one of their own. I don't find this intriguing in the slightest. Mr. Tyson holds a misunderstanding of what it means to be an agnostic and an atheist, and so it's not surprising that others will correct his confusion and place the correct label for him. Neil deGrasse Tyson is clearly an agnostic. He doesn't know if a God exists, but since he has no active belief in a God, he by default is technically an atheist, regardless of his aversion to the term.
And some will say, well, you're not being fair to the fact that they're actually the same thing. No, they're not the same thing, and I'll tell you why. Atheists I know who proudly wear the badge are active atheists. They're like in-your-face atheists, and they want to change policies, and they're having debates. I don't have the time, the interest, the energy to do any of that.
Now, here we get a direct glimpse of Neil deGrasse Tyson's conception of what it means to be an atheist, and it's very much flawed. There is only one prerequisite to be accurately described as an atheist: having a lack of a belief in a God. That's it. You don't have to be vocal about it or part of a larger movement to make society more secular or to bring about the end of religion. You don't have to participate in debates or even have a one-on-one discussion with others. All that you have to believe is that the claim that a God exists has not met its burden of proof. That's it. Mr. Tyson is an influential public figure who has had many opportunities to meet many prominent and influential atheists who have made their careers debating and discussing issues of God and religious influences on society and politics. I can fully understand and respect his passions lay elsewhere, and so he doesn't want to be a part of those circles. Fine. You can be every bit an atheist without being another Dawkins, Dennett, or Harris. Nothing about atheism requires anything more than a disbelief in the claim of a God's existence.
And it's odd that the word atheist even exists. I don't play golf. Is there a word for non-golf players? Do non-golf players gather and strategize? Do non-skiers have a word and come together and talk about the fact that they don't ski? I can't do that. I can't gather around and talk about how much everybody in the room doesn't believe in God.
While I wish we lived in a world where the word atheist didn't need to exist, it's not odd why it does. When the large majority of people believes in some form of God or gods, creating a word that succinctly expresses the lack of such a belief is useful. Neil uses the example of the lack of the need for a non-golfer label, but this overlooks an important distinction. If we lived in a world that nearly everyone seriously plays golf and tries to further entrench golf culture in other aspects of everyday life, it would become useful to create a label for those who are not golfers and who may not want golf to encroach their lives. The belief in the existence of a God and the supernatural are very important to many people, and so having a label for those who don't share these same commitments is logical and necessary. Towards the end of this clip, we find some additional misconceptions of what Neil thinks it means to be an atheist. Being an atheist does not mean you have to meet up with other atheists. It does not mean we have to strategize or discuss our non-beliefs with each other. While some people do enjoy such community, others don't, and we are no less atheists because of it. Humans are a social species, and atheists represent a small percentage of society. We are often oppressed, marginalized, and shunned by the religious, and so it's perfectly understandable why many atheists meet up together in a safe and accepting community. Additionally, many new atheists may be emotionally and geographically isolated and desire direction and support from larger atheistic communities. But once again, you can be just as much an atheist without ever going to a secular or atheist meetup or conference.
Agnostic separates me from the conduct of atheists, whether or not there's strong overlap between the two categories. And at the end of the day, I'd rather not be any category at all.
All right. In this final clip, Neil deGrasse Tyson asserts that by labeling himself an agnostic, he distances himself from the conduct of other atheists he wishes not to be associated with. You can do so without having to misuse a label that doesn't mean what you think it means. Just like you wouldn't judge all Christians from the actions of a small group of Christians, you ought not judge or associate all atheists with the actions and beliefs of particular atheists. In order to be a Christian, you have to accept that Jesus existed, was the Son of God, and resurrected. That's it. Any additional differences of beliefs have been codified around the more than 30,000 Christian denominations. In order to be an atheist, all that is required is to lack a belief in the existence of a god or gods due to the lack of sufficient evidence. That's it. If you desire to become a vocal atheist regarding theism in politics or education, then you can join such organizations. If you desire to be in a supportive community of like-minded individuals for entertainment purposes only, you can join such groups. No matter what group you join or don't join, or what movement you participate or don't, if you lack a belief in a god, you are an atheist. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button and subscribe. If you can spare a few dollars to support the efforts of this channel, visit my Patreon page here and become a patron today. Looking for a great place to communicate with vegans, atheists, theists, and non-vegans from across the globe? Consider joining the Vegan Atheist Forum. Our growing community is always looking for new members with whom we can share our experiences, debate issues, discuss, and learn from each other. Join the conversation at theveganatheist.com/forum.